Deep in the Appalachian woods, a CIA agent in a black suit unlocks a long-forgotten cabin where machines have been humming for 30 years without a single human touch. And when the woman once believed dead steps out of the shadows, he discovers that the real mystery isn't the abandoned lab or the trembling frequency beneath the earth, but how three wounded souls, a haunted agent, a lost young man, and a scientist returning from the ashes, find healing in the very forest that once frightened them, proving that sometimes the greatest revelation is simply learning how to live again. October draped itself over the Appalachian mountains like a fading ember, the red leaves still clinging to the last warmth of a long-gone summer. The forest exhaled the scent of pine resin and cold soil, and the wind slithered through the branches with a whisper that felt half myth, half memory. Far beyond the reach of any paved road, a dark-suited figure stepped out from a matte black government SUV, his polished shoes sinking into a bed of fallen leaves. Elias Mercer, age 33, carried himself with the quiet grace of a man who had long ago made peace with danger. He was tall, lean, and sharply built, his cheekbones cut like they were drawn with intention, his posture immaculate. His black suit was tailored to precision, the kind that moved like shadow around him. His dark hair was neatly swept back, a single rebellious strand always falling near his eyebrow, an annoyance he tolerated only because it reminded him he was still human. His eyes were cold steel on the surface but carried a buried tenderness, the kind earned only by someone who had lost more than he admitted. Years in the CIA had shaped him into a man who trusted silence more than conversation, observation more than confession. Tonight he had been sent to investigate a faint signal detected from a location that should have been dead for decades, a research cabin sealed by the agency over 30 years ago. The air held a strange stillness as he approached the cabin, an unassuming wooden structure that looked like nothing more than a hunter's retreat. Its roof sagged slightly under the weight of time, and moss clung to the logs like old scars. But two things were wrong: the faint hum behind the walls and the strange warmth radiating through the wood, as though the building were breathing. Elias pushed open the creaking door. Dust drifted lazily in the air, catching the glow of his flashlight. Inside, the place resembled the ghost of a laboratory, scientific instruments covered in a thin layer of age, notebooks stacked haphazardly, and a blackboard filled with chalk equations left unfinished. But the detail that tightened his brow was the work table. A white ceramic cup with a ring of dried coffee, frozen mid-sip by someone who should have been gone for decades. He moved to the generator in the corner. The thing looked like it should have died in the 80s. Yet when Elias laid a single fingertip against it, the engine sputtered alive instantly. Lights flickered, machines stirred. The chalk symbols on the board seemed to wake, as if eager to speak. Elias stood perfectly still, letting the strangeness settle. The cabin felt wrong in a way that did not frighten him, but intrigued him deeply, a sensation he had not felt since his earliest field missions. He stepped outside to circle the perimeter when a sudden rustle cut through the quiet. Someone, or something, moved clumsily behind a pine tree. Elias did not flinch. He tilted his head slightly, listening. Then came the sound of slipping feet, a startled yelp, and a body tumbling down the leafy slope. A young man crashed onto the path, arms flailing before landing face first in a pile of pine needles. Elias blinked once, and for the first time that night, the corner of his mouth lifted. The young man groaned, pushing himself upright. This was Logan Price, about 23, thin and slightly underfed, with light brown hair that curled unevenly as if it hadn't seen a comb for days. His skin was pale beneath the dust smudges, and his hazel eyes were filled with equal parts fear and embarrassment. Logan wore an oversized flannel shirt, torn at the elbow, and jeans faded into near gray. He carried the air of someone who had tried very hard to disappear from the world. His posture slumped inward, like he was forever apologizing for existing. His personality was gentle, but insecure, shaped by years of believing he wasn't good enough. Once a college student with decent grades, he had dropped out after failing a crucial exam, convinced that one failure defined him. He'd wandered into the mountains seeking quiet, hoping solitude would hide him from expectations he no longer felt capable of meeting. Now he stared at Elias as if he'd encountered a ghost in a tuxedo. I thought you were a poacher," Logan blurted out, rubbing his bruised knee. "Or a serial killer, or, I don't know, something scary." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And you handled that possibility by falling down a hill?" Logan flushed. "I panicked." Elias allowed himself a brief, quiet laugh, the kind that appeared rarely, a fleeting crack in his polished exterior. It warmed the cold air around them for only a moment, but it was enough to make Logan stare in disbelief. "Who are you?" Logan whispered. Elias glanced back at the glowing cabin. "Someone who needs to know why that place is alive again." Logan swallowed hard. "Then you're definitely scarier than a poacher." Elias simply motioned for him to stand. The forest hummed in the distance, as if also waiting to see what they would uncover. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet after Logan's fall and Elias's rare, fleeting laugh. Outside, the Appalachian night thickened, the wind weaving between the trees like a wandering spirit tracing old memory. The temperature dropped sharply, turning each breath into a pale cloud as Elias guided Logan back inside the cabin where the faint mechanical hum persisted beneath the floorboards. Once the door shut, the warmth from the old generator returned just enough to soften the cold. Elias swept his gaze across the room again, but this time with the focus of a man piecing together a crime scene only he could interpret. His gloved fingers traced the edges of aged files scattered across the desk until one folder, marked with thick red wax and the faded CIA seal, caught his attention. The flap was already cracked open, as if someone had pried it loose long after the lab had been abandoned. Inside lay a set of documents yellowed at the edges and a single sentence stamped at the top. "No one is to speak of what made them leave in one night." Beneath it was the name Dr. Marlene Hart, an American biochemist whose reputation had once shadowed half the scientific community. She had vanished in 1987 without explanation, leaving behind a string of unfinished projects and a legacy of brilliance tinged with controversy. Elias had studied her work during training. She specialized in sensory bioresponse, the ability of living organisms to react to frequencies beyond human perception. Rumor claimed she was on the brink of discovering something that frightened even her. Elias stared at the file longer than necessary, absorbing every detail. His suit jacket shifted slightly as he leaned in, and Logan, standing awkwardly nearby, tried to peer over his shoulder. Logan had brushed off the dirt on his flannel, but remained disheveled, his anxious energy radiating from every movement. Wanting to redeem himself for his earlier tumble, he stood straighter and tried to appear useful, though his hands fidgeted the entire time. Elias moved toward the blackboard. The chalk equations felt disjointed, as if the writer had been interrupted mid-thought. But Elias's eyes narrowed when he noticed something the earlier sweep had missed. A faint smudge beneath one of the equations, a handprint too fresh to be decades old. Someone had touched the board recently, within the last 48 hours, maybe less. He didn't voice the realization aloud. Instead, it sharpened his posture until he resembled a blade balancing on air. Behind him, Logan shifted nervously. "So, this Dr. Hart," Logan asked softly, "she was really that famous?" Elias didn't turn. She was someone the world wasn't ready for. Logan blinked, absorbing that. "Sounds lonely." Elias sighed, not at Logan's comment, but at the truth of it. Before he could reply, Logan's eyes dropped to the corner of the cabin floor where a wooden plank sat slightly crooked. Something about the Unevenness tugged at Logan's curiosity, a habit he had developed during childhood, tracing faults in furniture to distract himself from the constant pressure of being the smart one in his family. He crouched down and pushed gently. The plank shifted. Logan froze. Elias? I think something's here." Elias turned sharply, his steps silent despite the wooden floorboards. Together they lifted the loose plank, revealing a dark cavity beneath. Elias flicked his flashlight downward. A narrow space extended beneath the cabin floor, a hidden storage room no larger than a pantry, fortified with metal walls that didn't match the rustic exterior of the cabin. Logan's chest puffed slightly, pleased with himself. "See, I can be useful." Elias shot him a look that was half warning, half amusement. "Don't get ahead of yourself. CIA recruits survive breakfast before they celebrate." Logan tried to hide his grin. They descended into the hidden space, the air colder here than above. Dust particles danced around the beam of Elias's flashlight, revealing shelves lined with old audio reels, notebooks, and compact devices that seemed decades ahead of their time. In the center sat a portable tape recorder, its red light blinking faintly, as if waiting. Logan reached for it, but Elias stopped him gently and inspected the device first. Then he nodded. Logan pressed play. A woman's voice filled the cramped room, measured, calm, and tinged with the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting her discoveries more than embracing them. "This is Dr. Marlene Hart, day 142. The sound persists. It is not mechanical nor biological in the traditional sense. The forest responds to it. We respond to it, though none of us can explain how." A soft scratch of movement echoed on the tape. "If anyone hears this, the sound is not dangerous. What it reveals, that is the danger. Human memory was not built for such clarity." The recording cut off abruptly. Logan's eyes widened. "What sound?" Elias exhaled slowly. "That's what we're here to find out." He looked at Logan, disheveled, earnest, terrified, hopeful all at once, and shook his head with a sigh. "You know, if you keep this up, I might end up out of a job." Logan beamed despite himself. The cabin above them hummed faintly, as if eavesdropping on their discovery. And outside, deep in the forest, something answered with a low, almost imperceptible tremor. Night pressed against the Appalachian forest like a living thing, thick with cold and an ancient stillness that seemed older than the mountains themselves. Elias and Logan stood outside the cabin, the wooden steps creaking beneath their weight as the moon carved pale shapes across the clearing. The air was sharp enough to sting the lungs, and somewhere deep in the undergrowth, a faint vibration trembled through the soil, soft at first, then steady, like the heartbeat of the earth waking from a long, uneasy sleep. Logan froze, his breath catching. "Did you hear that?" His voice was barely above a whisper, trembling like the leaves overhead. Elias didn't answer immediately. He lowered himself slightly, fingers grazing the ground. The vibration pulsed again, slow, rhythmic, impossibly measured. Not an animal, not machinery from above ground. It was deeper, older, deliberate. "Yes," Elias murmured, "and it's coming from below." He straightened, eyes narrowing. The forest seemed to hush around them, listening. Logan swallowed hard, hugging his arms close to his chest. His flannel shirt, thin and worn, barely shielded him from the cold. He had always been someone whose emotions clung close to the surface, visible in the way his lips trembled and how he shifted his weight when he was scared. Tonight, fear and curiosity wrestled inside him, leaving him pale, but determined. Elias led the way back into the cabin. Beneath the glow of the flickering lights, he moved with the certainty of a man who had tracked danger in many forms. Using the heel of his shoe, he pushed aside dust and debris until he found what he suspected. faint scrape marks circling a portion of the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged across it recently. He knelt, slipped a hand beneath a wooden panel, and lifted. Beneath the plank was a metal hatch the color of old storm clouds, cold, smooth, and utterly out of place in a wooden laboratory built decades ago. Logan leaned forward. "Is that supposed to be here?" Elias shook his head. "No, this was added later. Someone wanted to hide something deeper." He grasped the latch. It groaned in protest as he heaved it open. Below lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness, the air colder than ice, carrying that same low hum they had heard outside. They descended cautiously. The walls shifted from wood to metal, then to reinforced steel coated with peeling white paint. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became, steady, resonant, like a call unanswered for decades. At the bottom waited a chamber that resembled a forgotten heart of the facility. Machinery lined both sides, consoles dotted with flickering lights, oscillators humming in perfect, unnatural rhythm. Dust coated everything, yet the machines pulsed with life. In the center stood a cylindrical device the size of a refrigerator, its panels glowing faint blue. Elias approached, scanning for recent tampering. "Someone activated this," he said softly. "Within the last 2 days." Logan stared at the machine with wide eyes. Why would someone turn on something this old? Elias didn't respond because the answer arrived without warning. A tape recorder on the desk clicked on by itself. A woman's voice flowed through the speakers, older than time, yet startlingly clear. If this is heard, then the sound lives on. Logan flinched. Elias remained still. "What we found does not threaten humans," the voice continued. "It reveals them. It strips away the walls we build to survive our memories. That is what made my team flee in one night." The tape hissed softly before ending. Logan let out a shaky breath. So they were scared of themselves? "Most people are," Elias replied. Logan sank onto a metal chair, his shoulders slumping. In the sterile light of the underground chamber, he looked younger than before, almost like a boy lost in a world too large for him. "Elias, I didn't come into the woods for fun. I wasn't trying to find myself or anything inspirational like that." He swallowed hard. "I failed my degree. I kept disappointing everyone. My dad said I didn't try hard enough. My friends moved on without me. I just couldn't face anyone anymore. I didn't want to be seen failing again." Elias leaned against the console, his figure framed by the dim blue glow. He rarely shared anything personal. Years of CIA discipline had taught him silence as survival. But Logan's trembling voice tugged at something inside him, something he had buried beneath missions, reports, and justifications. "I lost a teammate once," Elias said quietly. "Good man, good heart. I made a call in the field, and he trusted me." His voice grew softer. "He shouldn't have." Logan looked up slowly. "What happened?" "He didn't make it," Elias replied. No drama, no tremor, just truth, heavy and unpolished. "After that, I decided it was easier to be the man who never lets anyone get close. Easier to not feel anything too deeply." Logan stared at the humming machinery. "Guess we're both hiding from something." "Most of us are," Elias said, "but running into the woods rarely gives answers." Logan huffed a weak laugh. "Well, it gave me a concussion earlier." Elias almost smiled. "That too?" They stood there, two lives frayed at the edges, yet unexpectedly stitched together by a sound humming beneath the ground. The machine pulsed again, slow, steady, waiting. Something deep in the forest answered back with a whisper. Their night was far from over. The hum of the old machine beneath the cabin faded into a low, uneasy silence as Elias and Logan climbed back up the metal staircase. The forest night felt heavier than before, as if every branch and shadow were holding their breath. The air carried a coldness sharper than earlier, an omen more than a temperature. Elias pushed open the cabin door, but the moment they stepped inside, both men stopped at once. A figure stood framed by the doorway, her silhouette lit by the moonlight behind her. Her posture was upright, controlled, almost regal in its stillness. Logan choked on a gasp. Elias's hand moved instinctively toward the inside of his jacket. The woman raised a hand, not in fear, but as if greeting old colleagues she expected to recognize her. "Don't," she said, her voice firm but gentle, like someone accustomed to instructing a room full of people smarter than they believed. "I am not here to harm you." Elias lowered his hand slowly. His eyes sharpened, studying every detail. The woman stepped into the dim cabin lights. She was in her early 60s, her silver hair tied neatly at the back, streaked in darker shades that hinted at its original color. Her face carried sharp features softened by time, cheekbones once severe but now warmed by the faintest smile. She wore a faded field jacket several sizes too big, cinched at the waist with a frayed strap. The jacket was patched at the elbows, the kind used by hikers or older scientists working in rough terrain. Her brown eyes, deep and steady, held the weight of decades that had reshaped her from a brilliant researcher into something quieter and more weathered. She was Dr. Marlene Hart, very much alive. Logan looked ready to collapse. Elias remained composed, but a muscle in his jaw tightened, the only sign of shock he allowed himself. Marlene scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the blackboard, the old generator, the console beneath the floor. When she spoke again, her tone carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived years in hiding. "I imagine the CIA never stopped wondering," she said, "but I stopped caring about what they thought long ago." Elias stepped forward. "You disappeared in 1987. "I left," she corrected softly, "along with everyone else." Logan swallowed hard. "Why?" Marlene's eyes drifted to the machine below them, sadness thickening her voice. "We discovered a natural frequency, one buried deep beneath the forest, older than our species. It could close pathways in the brain responsible for trauma responses. In animals, it removed instinctive fear. A deer no longer flinched at approaching wolves. A rabbit stood unafraid before a hawk." Logan blinked in awe. "You cured fear?" She shook her head. "No, we misinterpreted it. It didn't remove fear. It removed the scars fear left behind." Elias's brow furrowed. "You tried it on humans." Marlene nodded slowly. "Against my better judgment. And what we found." She paused, gathering the words like fragile fragments. "Humans store memories differently. Pain shapes us. Regret shapes us. When the frequency washed through the lab, the researchers remembered things they had buried, losses they never healed from. Guilt they pretended had vanished. Secrets they believed forgotten." Her voice trembled. "That night, no one screamed because of danger. They screamed because they remembered." Logan stepped back, absorbing her words like cold water down his spine. Marlene continued, "They ran from the lab because facing themselves was more frightening than anything else." Silence clung to the air. Elias finally understood the sealed warning. Humanity is not always ready to remember its own wounds. Marlene turned to Logan now, her gaze oddly gentle. "You carry something heavy." Logan stiffened. "Everyone carries something." "Yes," she replied, "but not everyone hides in forests to escape it." Logan lowered his head, shame burning through him. Elias watched him, recognizing the posture all too well, the slumped shoulders of someone convinced they had disappointed the world. The woman reached into her jacket and retrieved a folder so thin it looked nearly empty. She placed it on the desk. "If you found the hidden room," she said to Logan, "then you should see this." Logan hesitated, then opened the folder. His hands began to shake almost immediately. Inside were intake forms from 1987, volunteers who had participated in early testing. One name appeared near the top, Daniel Price, Logan's father. Logan's breath hitched. No, this isn't. He came because he needed help, Marlene said quietly. He carried memories that destroyed him. I tried to shut them down, but the frequency did the opposite. It opened doors he had kept, locked his entire life. Logan's face crumpled, eyes burning with tears he had held back for years. He left us, he whispered. He just walked away one morning. No explanation. Because he remembered something that hurt too much, Marlene said. And people in pain don't always make kind choices. Logan covered his face, shoulders trembling. Elias stepped closer, resting a steady hand on his shoulder. His voice was half teasing, half compassionate. Go ahead and cry, kid. No one stays strong 24 hours a day. Logan let the tears fall, and for once he didn't hide his shaking. Marlene watched quietly, as though witnessing a piece of her past find resolution through someone else's grief. Outside, the wind rose again, gentle, almost soothing. It carried no threat, no tremor, only release. Dawn crept over the Appalachian mountains in slow, gentle strokes, painting the peaks in gold and the valley in thin silver mist. The forest, which for nights had carried the uneasy tremor of forgotten memories, now breathed with a softness that felt almost like relief. Rays of sunlight pierced through the pines, scattering little sparks across the clearing in front of the cabin. Elias stood outside with his usual composure, though something in his shoulders had loosened, almost as if the mountains themselves had allowed him to take one full, unshielded breath. Behind him, inside the cabin, Dr. Marlene Hart sat at the wooden desk, speaking into a secure satellite communicator that Elias had provided. Morning light touched the silver in her hair, turning it almost white gold. Her face, lined with age but steadied by the renewed strength of someone no longer hiding, glowed with gentle determination. Beside her stood an agent from the CIA who had arrived at dawn. Agent Russell Ward, a middle-aged man with a stocky build and a round face softened by years of desk duty. His thinning dark hair was combed carefully, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched precariously on his wide nose. He had warm brown eyes and the kind of nervous politeness that suggested he preferred paperwork far more than field missions. Although he lacked Elias's intimidating presence, Russell carried a quiet loyalty. He followed orders precisely, spoke softly, and was known in the agency for calm professionalism even under pressure. "We'll ensure your work is protected this time, Dr. Hart," Russell said gently, adjusting his glasses. Marlene gave a grateful nod. "I don't want it hidden. I want it studied properly and safely." Elias entered the cabin with confident, measured steps. "It will be," he said. "I've already sent the initial report. The agency won't treat you as a threat anymore." Marlene exhaled shakily, as if that one sentence loosened decades of loneliness. With the CIA officially re-establishing contact, the fear that had shadowed her since 1987 seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet pride that her research might serve the world instead of haunting it. Logan stood near the doorway, clutching a worn backpack. The grief from the night before still lingered in the redness of his eyes. But there was something new there, too, a steadiness, a beginning of self-worth. He wore a fresh jacket Russell had lent him, far too big but warmer than what he had before. Elias turned to him. "You ready?" Logan nodded, though his voice wavered. "Yeah, I think so." They stepped outside where a black SUV waited on the dirt path. Another CIA staff member, Emily Carver, a young administrative worker with warm caramel skin and curly black hair tied into a bun, stood beside it, clipboard in hand. Emily was in her mid-20s, petite and bright-eyed, with a slightly anxious energy. She had joined the agency mainly for the stability it offered, but beneath her professional demeanor was a kindness that made people trust her instantly. Logan blinked at her shyly, and Emily flashed him a gentle smile. "You must be Logan Price," she said. "I have your temporary documents ready, and your scholarship confirmation is inside this folder." Logan nearly dropped his backpack. "My what?" Elias approached with a small, rare smile tugging at his lips. "Your scholarship. Turns out discovering hidden facilities is valuable. Government wants to make sure you don't disappear into forests anymore." Logan's laugh cracked mid-breath, half astonishment, half disbelief. "I can't believe they're helping me." Emily nudged the folder into his hands. "You earned it." Marlene soon joined them outside, the morning wind tugging at her jacket. She studied Logan with maternal warmth. "Your father wasn't weak," she said softly. "He was hurting, and you are stronger than you think for facing the truth." Logan wiped the corner of his eye. "Thank you for telling me." Marlene clasped his hand. "Use your new beginning well." Russell and Emily began loading equipment into the SUV as preparations to leave continued. The cabin stood quiet behind them, as if relieved to no longer carry secrets too heavy for wood and dust. Finally, everyone was ready. Logan turned toward Elias, who stood at the edge of the forest, his black suit catching the wind like a banner of shadow and resolve. The sunlight framed him in gold, and for a moment Elias looked less like an agent and more like a myth, something carved out of dawn and duty. Logan jogged toward him. "Elias, if you ever need a field assistant or a team or—" Elias lifted a hand, amused. "Logan?" Logan stopped. "Yeah?" "Live your life. That's the biggest mission I'll ever give you." Logan laughed, not awkwardly this time, but freely, openly, as though the forest itself had lifted a weight off his chest. He stepped into the SUV, the door shut gently, the engine hummed, and the vehicle began the slow crawl back toward civilization. Marlene placed a hand on Elias's arm. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias nodded. "You gave the world something good. Time for the world to give something back." She walked toward the second vehicle, waiting for her transport. Elias remained behind a moment longer, standing at the tree line. The forest, warmed by morning light, felt transformed, not haunted, but renewed. No tremor, no pulse, only peace. 3 lives that entered broken had found something whole again. And as Elias stepped into the SUV to depart, the Appalachian woods glowed gently behind him, as though offering its own quiet blessing to their new beginnings.